Hello, welcome to the Writing 2 presentation, Planning and Starting Proposals. In this presentation, I'm really going to focus on the opening steps and some of the practical how you should actually get started, as you might see from the title. This presentation may seem a little bit redundant for some folks who are more self-starters, but I know a lot of students when starting a new project that they haven't done before tend to sort of spin their wheels on exactly what to do to get started. So this presentation is built around that, okay, I get what these are and I get what I'm probably supposed to do, I just don't know how to get started. And hopefully it's helpful. As you probably saw on the previous slide, we're using some pages from our book here. And on page 166, they talk about a couple of characteristics you should look at when you're looking for an issue to get started. You should look for a genuine issue, and what they mean is something that readers care about. So think about what other people are going to care about. And again, you want to consider your audience a little bit here. And with this presentation, you can kind of consider an audience that you're making up in your own head, so that helps a little bit. But maybe you're writing about something and you say, okay, I'm going to make a proposal, something we need to do at Ancilla College. Well, you want to write about something that college students will care about, your fellow college students, but also the other people who might have to make a decision. You're also going to want to look for something that's relevant and maybe a local issue. This is down toward the bottom of the page. You want a narrower topic, and I talk about that a lot in my classes, but look for something more local on a smaller scale. Because as you get into certain phases of this project, you can easily get in over your head if you're looking to solve a major problem. So for example, they give in the book word peace. Well, that's not something you're really going to solve in a short project like this. But maybe if you can find something in your community that seems to be a problem, or like I say, an opportunity, that might help. Now, as you're getting into this in your more academic and professional career later on, you might even go on and interview people if there's a specific population you're supposed to be working with. And people will appreciate that they have input on what you're doing. I know there have been times in my career where people have come up with these great ideas, but the people it was intended to help didn't really care about it. So you'll definitely want to think about that. If you're especially wanting to deal with a problem, you want to make sure that you look for a problem that has kind of a challenge. Now again, this is going to be a little bit awkward maybe with this project because you may not be aware of what's challenging and what isn't, but do your best with it. And look for the fact that maybe there's even something that people tried to solve in the past, but is a little bit more manageable now, as the book says. So you kind of have to find this balance between finding a problem that's challenging but also soluble. In other words, you can solve it. Finding that line between something that isn't just an easy solution that you're going to actually, something you'll actually have to spend time researching and write about, but also something that can be easily solved. If you're talking about, for example, a lot of students are doing papers in Writing 2 for a community need paper. They do papers on things like gun violence in a certain area, right? Well, that's definitely challenging. Is that something one person's going to solve with a proposal like that? Maybe not. Now, you may come up with some kind of idea and solution that would help part of it, but you want to be realistic about that. So just try to find that line in there. Again, I'm not going to challenge you too much on this. As long as it's something that you can actually research and write about, I'll be happy for this project. Our book doesn't really discuss opportunities, but I'm trying to make this project very realistic and practical for you as much as possible. And this is something where in your academic professional career, you might really be looking at an opportunity as much as a problem or a need that needs a solution. So you want to look for something that your organization or whatever you're interested in, maybe you don't immediately think, oh, there's a problem we got to solve. Oh, there's a need we got to fulfill. Maybe you're thinking, oh, this thing would be really cool. We'd really like to do this. And maybe then you think about, okay, this could serve these needs, and you kind of work backward. But you might be thinking about, it's not going to kill us if we don't do this. This isn't a need that's glaring and really going to mess things up if we don't address it. But this would be really cool. This would be really nice to expand. If you're thinking about it in terms of a business, you might think, we're doing pretty well. There's a local business, for example, that serves a specific need where they work on the fruit filling for yogurts and dairy products. But they also started looking for opportunities to expand, because in business, that's often what you do. You do well with one area and then you start expanding. So would it kill the organization and the company to not expand? Probably not. But this is something where they can make even more money and get even better in their network. So let's go for it. For a nonprofit organization, this might be a matter of saying, okay, this might be an opportunity to serve more people. This might be a way to even better fulfill our mission. So we might find something that we can do even better. And maybe you think of an idea or hear of a solution somebody else did, and you think, wow, yeah, that's an opportunity, and grab onto that. And hopefully the list of topics is helpful for that, and I'm happy to brainstorm those with you as well. And when you get what's on the screen, again, these kind of relate back to some of the earlier things we talked about potential needs and problems. Just you do want to be realistic, and as I just mentioned, think about your organization's mission. But again, as you're working on this project, I know these things may not be foremost in your mind, or you may be picking an organization and have no idea about their infrastructure. That's something that you and I can kind of hash out and talk over and communicate. But I want you to really just come up with ideas, and then we can go from there. Try not to limit yourselves off the bat with this. As you get started, it really helps to come up with an outline for your proposal. Now, for this particular project, I'm providing you with an outline, and some of the elements, I'm saying you absolutely need to have this section, and then I provide more suggestions for what you can fill out in there. That kind of helps. If you're doing like a grant proposal, we talk about that a little tiny bit. In the past, that was something that we did for this class, was a grant proposal. Oftentimes, they'll give you a format and an outline that you want to use, and they'll tell you specifically have to follow their format or outline. So depending on what context you're doing proposal in the future, this may be a little tougher, but for this project, hopefully you can work with the outline that I provide. We've talked a lot about this aspect in the other presentations about the specific sections, but as you're getting started, this is one thing that you can do. And again, the book kind of discusses this idea, and they get into it on 170. I've already hyped this paragraph like 2 or 3 times already in other presentations, so I don't want to get too far into it, but just remember that this is something that you can look around, especially find something that's interesting for your major or your field of study for this particular project, and look and see what may have happened in another community. Don't just completely copy everything, but you might use that as a launching point. The implementation presentation will hopefully really help you work on that section, and by the time you work on that section, hopefully you have some really good momentum from the other sections. But with implementation, here are a few things that you want to kind of keep in mind as you're coming up with ideas on what you should actually put in that section. You want to consider who would do most of the work. I've had some experiences in the past where people got grant money, for example, and they had put in the grant that certain people were going to do certain things. They never actually came and bothered to ask people, and I was one of those. They just figured I would do it, and that's not really a good practice. So you want to think about that. For this project, yeah, you're not going to go around and actually ask people, but you might actually think, okay, who's actually going to do most of this work? And that way, you won't have to spin your wheels so much on it. You also want to consider the decision makers' priorities. That's something that comes up a lot in these presentations. But as you're coming up with ideas for your implementation, this is something you want to keep in mind about. When you're thinking about how this is actually going to happen, is this something where they're going to be okay with spending some money and some resources, or is it going to have to be something that we kind of try to find extra resources? Maybe people who are currently working there can spend a few hours a week on it rather than hiring a new person or something like that. And that kind of leads into being realistic about deadlines and financial resources. As you're working on this and starting your proposal, I recommend that you keep in mind that the time the timeline often includes challenges and things that you may not consider. So when you're looking at doing a project, I would say, don't just say, well, on Monday we're doing this, on Tuesday we're doing this, on Wednesday we're doing this, and this whole awesome new thing will be done by the end of the week. That's probably not realistic, especially because oftentimes we're dealing with resources that take some time to gather up, or if we're using people in our organization who are already working there, they're not going to be able to drop everything for a week and go do this other new thing. So just keep in mind that with your timeline and financial resources, you want to be realistic about all of that. Now, again, reach out to me if you have questions about that. I'm not really going to, come down real harsh on you if I feel like, well, maybe that's not the best use of financial resources. My job isn't to make that determination. But as you're drafting, I may give you some advice on, this may be starting to get out of control and be a lot of money. Maybe for an organization like that, you may want to cut it back a little bit or come up with a cheaper solution. So as you're getting started, these are some considerations to make. Once you've come up with some ideas for these different sections mentioned in the previous slides here, and you start getting ready to write, and you're moving then from maybe outlining and just, writing down a list of ideas to actually writing all of this out. Remember, you can use your argument tools, and this is something that we talk about in other writing classes. Don't be afraid to go back into your textbook and look at the argument chapter and revisit that, because those tools of persuasion you can now put to use to help persuade your audience to approve this proposal or to do this thing that you want them to do. As you start writing, you also want to anticipate some possible objections. And this is going to help you come up with content. That's why I'm emphasizing this. As you move forward into your professional and academic careers, you are going to have people who have these objections. So you want to think about this as you're starting to write, because again, in this project's case, this will help you with content, but this is good practice. You want to think about those who are invested in the status quo, and the status quo meaning things just as they are. You are going to have some people who are concerned they're going to be asked to do more without adequate incentive. That's a fancy way of saying more work without more pay. Or am I going to be paid for doing this extra work? Or is this going to be a volunteer thing? And if so, what other incentive do I have besides just feeling good about myself? Especially at a company that's trying to make money, you're going to run into this. Another thing that you're going to run into that you have to consider when you're writing is territory concerns. In other words, who might feel like this proposal coming from you might be perceived as a threat that you're trying to take over their area. Now, with this particular project that you're doing for this class, probably you won't need to think about that a lot. This is something that you'll think about more once you get experience at a particular company. But I'm including this as something that you do want to consider, since these slides can apply to more than just this project. You also want to think about those who benefit from the current system. And there are some people, I'm being diplomatic about this, I think, but there's who have things pretty good in the current system. And if you add something new, that's going to be challenging to them. Maybe they would see it as more work, but it also might be more responsibility for them. Or it could be people who they see it as something that might challenge their finances in their part of the budget. And they might see, well, if this works, if this solution happens, then the company's going to prioritize that over them, and they're going to lose money over it. You also want to think about financial watchdogs, and every company or organization needs these, and this is great. And again, all of these can be very positive things to think about, that you're going to have people who are like, okay, but where's this money coming from? Now again, for this project, I don't want you to get too hung up on this. We'll come up with a solution together if we need to. But you are going to have people who this is their main thing that they think about. Even if their job is not CFO, Chief Financial Officer, or they're not an accountant, they're still going to be people who this is really what they focus on, is how are we going to pay for this? So you want to think about that as you're even getting started on this project. I know it's tough because you don't maybe have a lot of experience in this field, but at least do your best with it, and we'll see what you come up with. thanks for watching, everybody. If you're spinning your wheels on this project and really having a hard time getting started, contact me. I'm happy to help. I love helping students get started with projects and anywhere else along the line that they need it. So if you're watching this and still not sure how you should plan and start, contact me. We'll communicate and we'll get it done.